Welcome back to Legacy Leaders, where we talk about what it means to lead with purpose and create an impact. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most important leadership qualities, and it's vision. I'm Juan,
I'm Ben.
and before we get to that, we're gonna talk about a little something that Ben got's going on. Let's have him talk about his upcoming book that's about to be released, or it probably is released right now. You got to
Yeah.
let it out, bro. What you got to say?
Yeah, that second book we talked about in that first episode. I told you I was working on a second book and I didn't want to give any timelines. I didn't plan on putting this out till probably December, but got it with publishing probably about 2 weeks ago. Just hit Amazon today, so you can pick it up on Kindle, paperback, hardcover. Now that it hit Amazon, probably 2, 3 weeks, we'll get it out to Barnes and Noble and all those other book platforms. But the book is called Beyond the Fall, my journey through second chances. So beyond the fall, my journey through second chances. That's the name of that one.
What can they expect? Let's give a little preview, bro. Let's let them know what they can expect out of this book.
This book's a little bit different, man. It's more of a conversational style. It's less about the leadership per se. Indirectly, it talks about some leadership stuff in there, but it's more like a memoir. It's more, starting from my childhood and some of the things that I've gone through, trials, tribulations, and the things that I've really gone through every time I had a setback or so-called failure or a hardship or something like that in my life, it was always right before I leveled up and did something better. So really, this book is kind of takes you through my life and some of the mistakes and some of the things that I've learned along the way to become a leader in who I am today. And that's kind of what this book is. It gets real personal, man. I'm
Yep.
telling you, my wife was reading it and she got a couple chapters in, she had to stop reading it. She was crying. It kind of hit home for her and she's nervous, Annie's nervous.
Yeah.
She said it's a very personable book. So
If she was crying, man, it means it's going to be a very impactful book. It's going to hit a lot of people's lives. A lot of people can relate, and a lot of people are going to actually know who Ben Davis actually is. And what you've been through. A lot of people just see you at work and outside in the community. But they don't really know what you've been through, what you had to hustle through. Me and you have had plenty of conversations where we talked about what we've been through. So I know your story a bit, and I just got a shout out there. He gave me the privilege to write, about a page on his book and my first publishing. As you can say, I'm becoming an author. Let my mama know, hey, I'm making moves. But it's a privilege to be able to just talk about Ben Davis. Like I've always said, he's been a great impact in my life and always helped me out. So just him giving me that privilege to just write that little short intro in it means a lot.
yeah, it's pretty cool, man, to have your name associated with my second book, because obviously, like you said, I've made an impact in your life, and I could probably reach out to a handful of people, that would probably do that. But it was important for me at the time to put you on the map as well. You've done a lot with me over the last 5, 6 years, and these last couple chapters, like I said, my whole life has been trials and tribulations and things I've gone through, and there's been incremental people that have been part of that, and it's kind of like seasons of your life, and you're an important part of this season right now, and all the things that I've gone through in the last 6 years, 7 years, moving to California with my family all by myself, no family, no friends out here really. So to make that connection and be able to pull you up with me, man, I thought that was important. And what better way to show about second chances than bring somebody in who's lived it right next to me, from what you've gone through to where you are now, man. That's huge.
Most definitely, and definitely we can talk about this book because our topic is vision, and that's a vision that you have currently, is writing out these books and making an impact on people's lives, and it's an important thing to have vision, and in uncertain times of fear and doubt and confusion rises, vision is what helps us see beyond the chaos. It's not about predicting the future, it's about holding on to the bigger picture. Even when the road gets tough, your vision stays clear. Let's talk about what's vision mean to you as a leader.
Vision to me as a leader is really kind of a starting point. We've talked about it several times about if you don't know where you're going, how the hell are you gonna get there,
Yes,
right?
most
If
definitely.
you and me are gonna get up and race right now, I'm like, hey, Juan, let's race. I'm probably gonna win because you don't know where the hell we're racing to.
Yep, yep.
So we got to have a vision. It's got to be in line with our people on our team, the people around us, our circle, whether it's work, whether it's your family life. The vision is really dictates the action.
Yep.
Without vision, there's no action. With no action, there's no movement.
Hmm.
So you have to be able to create that. But I think vision in particular is a very important topic because a lot of times us as leaders, we have to create vision for people that don't see that for
Yeah.
themselves yet, right? We have to inspire people. We have to get behind it and say, "Hey, look what you can do." And people think it's BS, or you blowing smoke up their ass or whatever. Sometimes you have to be able to take physical um, situations and show people practical things that they can do to implement to change their lives. And it's baby steps, but the vision is like, hey, you're here right now. Let's get you up here. What is your vision is a lot driven by your why.
Yeah.
Like everybody has a different why. Some people it's money, some people it's legacy, some people it's family, some people it's different for all of us. So I think it's important to find out what your why is first, and then create your vision, and then create a vision for the people around you, and be crystal clear with that vision, so everybody knows the direction. Everyone knows where they're going.
And most definitely, we talk about vision as a leader. You definitely me. You pulled me up when I was down, and I didn't even know where I was going. I didn't even have a vision of my own. All I thought it was, that drug dealing life was going to be the rest of my life for me. Until you pulled me aside and we had that conversation, what we talked about already in my interview, and you brought that vision to my life. You put that to my perspective to me to see beyond what I was seeing. And being able to drive that vision into my life, and then seeing my own vision and being able to capitalize on that and going for more. And if you, as a leader, you gotta, like you said, you gotta paint that vision for people, because sometimes. And I feel like in the society we live in today, a lot of people don't have vision. A lot of people don't know where they're going. A lot of kids get out of high school, and guess what happens? They keep on living the same life, going out partying and doing all this type of other stuff. And then when the 30 hits, guess what? I didn't do nothing with my life because they didn't have a vision. And I feel like that's so important in today's age, where sometimes we need to be that person that puts the vision in other people's lives, because a lot of people don't have that vision or don't understand what the vision is. And it's going to hit our next topic, which is sight versus vision. A lot of people see, but they don't have a vision. Just because we see, okay, I can see that wall over there, but is that your vision? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have sight, right? They live day to day. They make goals for the week, or hey, I'm going to do this by next year. I mean, everybody sets that New
Yeah,
Year's resolution. That's short
yeah,
sightedness, right? That's like, oh, for 2025, this is what I'm going to do. And then you get to 26 and you're like, shit, I didn't do anything I said I was going to do last year. Let's
most
do it
definitely.
again. So, but we talked about this in one of our last
Yes.
episodes. Like, why wait until New Year's?
Yeah.
Right? Every day is a new day. Every
Yes.
day, every day you can do something else. And so it's like, why not wake up and have a plan for the bigger picture, right?
Yeah.
The sight is what we're trying to achieve in the short term goals.
Hmm.
Vision to me is really casting a dream.
Yeah.
It's almost out of reach. It's so big that people don't believe in it because they don't think you can obtain it.
Yeah.
So vision is like, it's got to be challenging, but it's got to be obtainable. And it's like those smart goals that people set, but it's a long term
Yeah.
thing. It's like, hey, someday I'm going to leave a legacy in this world, and here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to touch people's hearts, and I'm going to teach them. I'm going to pull them forward. I'm going to grow with them. But and the way I do that, to break it down into small steps, into that site that we're talking
Yeah.
about, is like, pick two, three people that are in my life right now and say, okay, this person has potential. This person could use some help, and
Yeah.
get past that, and then really show them the way, and cast that vision to them and say, hey, man, come here real quick. What's your goals? What are you going to do with your life?
Yep.
And it just starts with a simple conversation, right? That's the same way me and you
Yep.
started. Like, hey, man, let's go sit down for a minute, and it took you out of your element. You weren't on the line cooking at the time. You weren't doing your thing. You weren't out back on a break. I said, hey, man, let's go sit down, make you really get uncomfortable and
Yeah.
get out of your comfort zone and really think about, okay, now what do you want for your life? And it starts with that conversation. That's where the vision has to start, is just conversations.
Yeah. So like you said, sometimes we see things, but we don't have a vision. We don't see long term goals because, like you said, sometimes we feel like it's unachievable to be able to see that vision that we have. And I feel like I'll talk from my experience in my life. I feel like it's more of a Hispanic, maybe, whatever culture, but in Hispanic, we don't see that. Our parents taught us to work, have a good job, and hope for a retirement, but they didn't help us paint that picture, that vision to see long term and say, let me set these goals, and let me achieve more than it is. So we grow up, we become the product of a product of our parents. So if our parents didn't have a vision, what happens with us? Sometimes we don't have that vision, and sometimes we're going through life just coasting. Like you said, you got me uncomfortable, sat me down, and had that conversation. I didn't know like I said, I've always told people this. I always thought I was gonna be selling drugs my whole life and making living selling drugs, and my job was going to be a part-time, and having that question asked to me really opened up my mind and started thinking a little more, and especially when I started getting more books in my mind. Think and Grow Rich, the magic of thinking big is big books that can get
Huge.
your vision just setting it, and you can go after what you really want, and I recommend these books because I read them. It opens your mind even more. Napoleon Hill's books definitely open your mind to
Yeah.
start having more of a vision and start going after what you really want. Let's share a personal story when vision carried you through uncertainty times.
And to be honest, man, that whole book that I just wrote, that whole book takes you through so many different situations, right? From my childhood, from my mom leaving to me being fired at Bennigan's to moving to California, my wife going through cancer. Like, there's been so many uh, moments in my life where vision has really had to carry me to where I'm at today. Because
Yeah,
we all go through those peaks and valleys and ups and downs and trials and tribulations. We all go through that uncertainty and that doubt. You know, and I think for me, a big part of my vision comes back to my faith.
yeah,
If you can relate your vision to your faith, I think that's a huge thing, right? Because at the end of the day, when people are down and out, that's where they're going to turn to is their faith. So if I can relate my overall vision of impacting the world and touching people to my faith, and I could lead my life like Jesus and I can impact people, that's going to bring me back to my centering point, and that's going to bring me back to my positivity when I have those setbacks, and really be able to implement that vision is kind of what grounds you and pulls you from the slumps, and really gets you going, right? It's like, hey, I'm not there yet. My job's not finished.
yeah,
I came to California with a goal. I'm,
yeah,
I'm out here trying to grow this business and make it as a multi-unit leader down the road. And recently I was offered a spot back in Colorado. And you know what? I would love that spot in Colorado, but I don't think that's where I'm being called to. I think I came out here 7 years ago. I set out on a mission, and that mission's not complete yet, and that's why I'm still here. I have more people to touch out here, more lives to change out here, and that's my goal. And so you just got to keep your faith in that vision and really stick to it. Sometimes the steps change,
yeah.
right? But the overall goal never changes. Like,
Never.
sometimes we have to pivot, but the goal is still the goal.
Yes. And you talked about faith, and there's a big book, most successful, most sold book there is out there. But there's this little quote, where there's no vision, the people perish. But that to me is like impactful, where when the people lose vision, it's you're gone. It creates chaos because you don't know where you're going. You're running. And I'll talk about. I'm still chasing this dream. I'm still chasing this goal. I might get 10, 15 views, 100 views, 1,000 views, or whatever it is, but I'm still dropping content. I'm still recording because this is my vision. A lot of people gonna call me crazy or say, "Oh, look at this dude talking smack." But like you said, it's my vision. I might change it up a little bit, start doing other things, but yet again, my vision is still there, and I still chase it. Sometimes we go to practice, but we find different ways of making that shot. We go to practice and we find different ways of making that layup, or whatever the case may be. But you're just perfecting the craft until you're able to actually, set that goal straight up and go really after what it is. And my story is vision. Like I just talked about, I got fired. We sat down, bro. I told him my vision, what I was about to do, and it might have took me a year to start it up, but I'm here doing it. I'm actually motivating people, having events where I speak, and now there's podcasts, I make reels and all this other stuff, so I can put my content because this is what I really love to do is record and be able to just inspire and impact people's lives. Let's go to
We're in a
yeah,
we're in a new era too. It's like social media and podcasts and reels, and the amount of people we can reach by utilizing this stuff. A lot of people are out there like knocking Facebook or
yeah,
knocking Instagram or Snapchat and all these things, right? And they're like, oh, it takes the personability. I disagree, because now we can create content and we can speak to the hearts of millions of people.
Yep.
You know, if you take these situations that you've seen all over the world the last couple weeks, man, how many people are coming together for these candlelight vigils in other countries that weren't even part of America? You know, it's amazing how fast we can spread news nowadays. So if you can spread news that fast, how fast can you spread motivation? How fast can you spread vision? How fast can you spread positivity and legacy and different things, right? So I think your vision is right in line with where the world's going right now, and just keep putting out that content. Let's keep kicking it and
Yeah.
staying positive and changing lives. You know.
You know, we stay consistent. We talked about it. We stay consistent. We keep on trying to work. Our lives are busy. We're always, you know, you're always a busy man. I'm always a busy man. As soon as, you know, we go separate ways, but we always make time to be able to do this podcast. That's why we ended up doing it this way this time, because we're busy people. You know, I got to be back at work early in the morning, you know, taking care of your kids. So you can't really have that time to come over here and sit down and record. But when you think about vision, how do you personally define it? How's your definition of the vision? We talked a little bit, but let's go more in depth into it. Let's see what
Yeah, I
you actually
think
mean.
vision has to be something that is an internal drive, right? It's really how you put your heart into words. That's vision to me. It's heart, mind, body, soul. You know, when those things all connect for a bigger picture, and it's really the vision is what is your legacy?
Yeah,
You know, we call this the Legacy Leaders Podcast,
yeah,
right? And my vision is how do I leave a legacy, not just for my kids, but for the world?
yeah,
You know, and when I think about vision, it's like, okay, what's my purpose? Right? We talk about leading with purpose. What is my purpose?
yes,
And I got to think to myself, like, okay, when I get up in the morning, what's my goal? You know, it's not just to float through life. Like, what am I as a person different than Juan or different than the next person that comes into contact with me?
yeah,
And how am I going to impact the world and change it for a better? And that's where the vision kind of stems from. If your dream is within reach, you're not dreaming big
yeah,
enough. Like you gotta go after it. You gotta chase things, you gotta make things happen. And it's gotta be so big that people think you're crazy.
yeah,
If you got a real true vision and a true dream out there, people are gonna look at you like, oh, you can't do that. You
yeah.
can't do that. That's impossible.
Hmm.
And people are out there making the impossible possible every single day. And that's vision to me is doing the impossible.
Yeah, and you're talking about impossibles, bro. Imagine if Thomas Edison, all these amazing, smart inventors would have stopped seeing the vision. We wouldn't have light. We wouldn't have none of the stuff that we have if they would have stopped chasing that vision. You know, Kobe Bryant had a vision to become one of the greats, and guess what? Michael Jordan did too, and they were some of the top NBA players out there in the league. You know, a lot of people can't top what they did. You know, they left a legacy as well. Kobe Bryant left a big legacy. As we talk about
Yeah.
legacies, he left a big legacy, but he had a vision to become one of the greats, and he is one of the greats. You know, and I'm a Celtics fan, throwing it out there. You know, I'm a Celtics fan, but I do respect Kobe Bryant, and no Laker fan, nothing. I'm a big Celtics fan, but I respect the hustle. I respect people's game, and he's a person that you got to definitely respect. You know, like I said, vision is very important. You know, like you said, making the impossibles possible. And out there, a lot of people are going to criticize you and always going to talk smack until you actually make it happen. And when you make it happen, what are they going to say? I believed in you. You know,
Yeah, I knew that guy. I
you,
knew that guy
I used
once.
to work with him. I used to hang out with him, and
Yeah.
all this type of stuff that they're going to be talking about there. But has there ever been a time in your life where vision gave you direction when everything around you felt unstable?
Yeah, I think just the move to California in general was a vision that kept me going,
Yeah,
right? I mean, I was in a restaurant, I was doing low volume sales, and my vision was to do bigger things and really be promotable. But I used to tell people I'll never be known for sales, and now I am known for
yeah,
sales. Who would have thought? But
yeah,
in my mind, my vision back then was I'll never be known for sales. So I want to be known for developing people. And that was always my theme, man. Like ever since I got promoted into a manager role, in my career, I always wanted to say, man, this is cool. I want to let other people feel this. Like,
yeah,
how can I get them promoted? How can I help them? So it's all about developing people and moving forward. And so that vision, even moving to California with no family, no friends, nothing out here, that vision really kept me going. I started meeting new people like yourself and other managers and promoting people. And sometimes I'm like, man, every time I promote people, I got to start over.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
would my life be easier if I didn't promote everybody? Absolutely. You know, if I developed people around me and I kept them for myself selfishly, my job would be super cake,
yeah,
man. You know, because I wouldn't have to do it over and over. And then, you know, I'd probably be a little more consistent in my personal numbers.
yeah,
You know, but my goal is not to better myself. My goal is to better the world and develop other people. You
yeah,
know, so I think that that vision helps carry me through that selfishness sometimes when I'm like, man, I could keep this one and not have to worry about working so hard, you know. But that vision, you know, at the end of the day, man, the legacy that I want to leave is my kids think I'm a great dad and I've impacted the world and I've helped people. And, you know, it comes down to what will people say about me at my funeral?
yeah.
That's what I think about, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, most definitely. You know, those are great things, and you talked about it. You know, we could have had an all-star team, but we wanted to help other people get promoted. You know, and when you stop thinking selfishly and start helping others, you know, throughout my journey before I even actually became the manager, you know, I helped so many people out get promoted before I got promoted, you know, and I was sitting there. But at the end of the day, what helped me was my vision, knowing that okay, eventually I'm gonna have the spot that I want. So I gotta keep on doing this until that timing comes. You know, there's no perfect timing since the Lord up above's time. You know, and I had to remember that and keep on going after it and understand that the vision was what helped me. You know, I'm gonna be where I want to be, and eventually helping so many people, I ended up being in that position. And like you said, you start create. I didn't even know about that at the time. You know, creating a legacy, and I had so many people know me from different states, and I didn't even know about it. You know, like I met so many people throughout my journey of being a manager and going around other places and helping people that I started creating a legacy of people knowing me from different places. And I could tell you every time I've gone to an event, Ben Davis, yes, you know, and I have so many people talk about you, but that's creating a legacy and having, you know, your vision has
Right.
impacted so many people with your movements that you've done. But let's talk about, and I could talk about this one too, you know, why do you think so many leaders lose sight of their vision when uncertainty hits?
You know, I think that's a natural thing for doubt to hit, but I think depression creeps in and that it goes back to your faith again. You know, I think that that's the devil doing his work. You
Yep.
know, you've read the book, right? Outwitting the Devil.
Yes.
That
Yes.
was a good
Yes.
book.
Yep.
You know, and really it comes down to being true to yourself and being able to pull yourself out of that, you know. And so I think they lose sight of it because they lose sight of what their heart wants, you know, and they really can't bring themselves out of a funk, whether it's grief, you know, losing a loved one or someone getting sick or losing a job, you know, that puts you in a little bit of a funk,
Yep.
you know. So what do you think? I mean, how
Yep.
do you get out of it?
You know, and we'll talk about it. You know, it's happened to me so many times where that doubt creeps in and uncertain. You know, and I'm just trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing. You know, because I lose sight of my purpose. I lose sight of my vision. And the biggest thing, like I've always said, I've always gone to the beach to reconnect and remember my vision, remember my why, and keep on going. You know, but certainly, you know, when that uncertainty hits, we lose sight. We forget about what we're doing, and I created a reel yesterday, you know, I talked about it, you know, that we take the easy path instead of taking the hard path. And sometimes
Mm,
because the path is hard, we don't want to do it. And that stops our vision from being able to be accomplished. So it's easier to go get drunk than to actually face what I had to go face, you know, in that hard time of trying to
yeah.
accomplish my vision. Instead of speaking out, I was drowning in the bottle. Instead of doing all this other stuff, I was going out and hanging out with the wrong people, doing the wrong things, you know. And it's like I said, it's easier to do the bad than to do the good. But losing your vision, you gotta always remember the why, always reconnect. And even if you burn,
Yeah.
and you always told me this, I'm taking care of you so you don't burn yourself out. And I never understood it until that moment happened. And I realized, like, oh, damn, I burned myself out. This is why I went through everything because I lost sight of my vision, you know, and
Yep.
being able to help someone reconnect and refresh and remember their reason why and the vision is very helpful. But you know,
Yeah, I think that's a good.
no, you're good.
I was gonna say that's really a lot about what I wrote in this book too. You know, the whole reason it's called My Journey Through the Second Chances Beyond the Fall is because it points out those times in my life where I did lose faith and I did lose vision and I did get negative and I had to bounce back from things, you know. And every time, every one of those situations I bring up in my book is like, damn, I'm down in the dirt, right?
Hmm.
But we talked about this before too. Like when you're down at rock bottom, there ain't nowhere to go but up. So you can look at it as a positive. You can find the silver lining. You know, when you're at the top, you're killing it. You're on a high. You know, so I think I lose my vision more when I'm in that plateau and I'm mundane day to
Yeah.
day, you know, going through the motions and I'm not challenging myself. If I'm not challenging myself, that's when I really lose vision because it's like I'm not, you know, at rock bottom. When I'm at rock bottom, that's when I'm able to like really be like, all right, shit, kick myself in the ass and I can find it, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm like, all right, this ain't me, man. I'm better than this. Let's go. You know, when I'm at the top, I'm at the top of my game. I'm killing it. I'm like, all right, there's my vision. Let's keep killing it. You know, so it's really when I'm like hosting. You know, we
Yeah.
talked about that a couple times in those different episodes, but that's when I hit those plateaus, man. I'm telling you, that's the worst place for me to be. My worst uh, work ethic. That's my worst attitude. That's my worst everything. My worst drive. You know, when I'm just kind of comfortable, I can't stand it, man. I'm so unhappy being just okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, most definitely. But sometimes that's when you need those true people in your life that's gonna hit you up and say, "Hey, bro,
Yeah.
what are we doing? Let's get better. Let's go after." You know, and that's something that helped us out when we were, both going after that same goal, the same journey. You know, that we pushed each other. Like, "Hey, bro, nah, man, that's weak. We
Yeah,
need to do more."
your circle's important.
You-
Circle's important, man. We talk about that all the time. You are who you hang with.
Yeah,
You know, so if you got negative ass people in your life, you can be negative. You got positive people pushing you and motivating you, you know, you're more likely to succeed if your circle's succeeding.
and sometimes your circle can kill your vision. With like I
Oh
just
yeah.
said, just going out to drink and taking you out to do things that's not helping. You're helping your vision. And
Mhm.
sometimes we want to be with those people, but sometimes we got to realize that we got to leave those people because they don't have the same vision we have. And eventually, when you're going through your journey, you're gonna associate yourself with people that have the same vision as you, and you guys are gonna connect, and you guys are gonna go after it. And like I said, that's something that
Oh
brought
yeah.
me and you together so close. That we had the same vision that we wanted to, you know, be number
I mean,
one.
look, we could be at the bar drinking a beer right now instead of making a podcast. Or we can be hanging out making a podcast and doing something positive. You know,
You,
you are who you hang with. You know,
yep,
we could be out there right now. I could probably call 5 people and be like, hey man, let's go shoot some pool and drink some beer.
yep,
You know, and all 5 of them people will probably be like, all right, let's go.
yeah,
Not one of them will say, hey man, let's jump on a podcast real quick.
yep.
You know, there's very few people out there that are trying to do that.
Most definitely. It says vision anchors leaders and teams in the why when the how is unclear. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the vision has to come from the leader. You know, the leader has to really make that important. And you have to be so crystal clear with your team on what the vision is, but also how to obtain the vision,
Yeah.
right? Everyone has to know their role. They have to do their role. You know, we may have different roles in this vision. And for me to succeed, I need you to own your shit and do it. And I need to own my shit and do it so that you can succeed. But we have to work as a team because nobody can really get there alone. You know,
Yeah.
there's very few visions out there that are big enough that one person can do. There's not many out there that I can think of that one single person can do to achieve such a grandiose idea or change the world or do something important, right? So the vision has to be crystal clear. It has to be communicated so granular that everybody understands their lane and they stay in their lane and we're all pulling the same direction.
And I like that you said everybody pulling the same direction because we can be on a boat. I can be rowing this way, you can be rowing that way, and all we're gonna be doing is going in a circle.
Yeah.
If we don't paint that picture, and I always tell people this, there's a painter back in the day that used to come out in I think PBS. I'm gonna paint this little tree right here. You paint your own
Little
vision.
Bob Ross.
You paint your own vision, so you start painting that vision for other people to understand. And like I said, you're gonna find a lot of people that have the same vision as you do, or some people that been wanting to get to that vision, but they didn't know how. But you paint the picture for them, and they start going
Yeah.
after it. But great leaders keep their team focused on futures worth moving forward. You just talked about it
That's
right
that
now.
comes back to that. Yeah, I mean that also comes back to a lot of things that we talked about before, like the emotional intelligence and EQ part of it. I think to have such a good leader, you have to have the vision. But if you don't have EQ and emotional intelligence to connect with each person individually on your team,
Yep.
you'll never achieve that goal. Because like I said at the very beginning of this episode, everybody has a different reason why.
Yes.
Everybody has something that makes them tick, right? Whether it's money, whether it's a future, whether it's, hey man, I like going to concerts. Like, hey, if we do X, Y, and Z. This is the goal we're going to obtain. Here's the vision. You can go to 7 more concerts if we hit that.
Yep.
So it really comes down to how you utilize communication when you're casting that vision too. You can't just say, "Hey, this is it. This is what we're doing." You have to make it relatable to everybody on your team, which means you got to know your people. So before you cast a vision, you got to get to know your people. So first thing I do on any organization or any team is little people matter. It's sitting down, getting to know you, where you come from, who's your family, who's your past, what tickers do you have that set you off and make you go 0 to 100. What tickers do you have to get you excited that I can really pump and get you pumped up and really selling you a dream. Because at the end of the day, you got to sell a dream. That's
Yep.
the vision. When you're casting vision, you're selling somebody a dream, and you might not even um, break it down for them 100%, and they may think, oh, that's not happening, that's unobtainable, right?
Yeah.
Like when you met me, you didn't know my whole story.
No.
You didn't know my past. You didn't know my issues with alcohol or drugs or people that I've helped or best friends that have died or
Yep.
overdoses or any of that, right? So for me to get to know you, and I'm coming in and talking to you and figuring out what makes you tick, I'm able to share my stories with you and automatically we connect, right?
Yep.
So it's easier for me to sell you a vision and say, hey, Juan, look, man, this is all the shit I've been through in my life, man.
Yeah.
Like you're now just going through this. You're 10 years younger than me, and I've done this, man. And look at me now, right? I've come
Yep.
through the other end of it. I'm successful, and you can do it too.
Yeah.
Let me show you how. And so it's about finding what connects with people. It's about finding what makes them tick, and then really breaking the vision down into their language.
Yeah, and like you said, it's definitely getting to know people. We had that episode, with emotional intelligence and understanding why people get motivated and what can I do for them to get pumped up to go after what we really want to, and I could talk about another great book by, it's How to Win Friends and Influence People that can get you really going
Dale
as well.
Carnegie.
Yes,
That's a good one,
it's
man.
definitely it gives you not only that EQ and all that other stuff that you're looking for, but it gets you that help to help other people accomplish their vision and all this stuff, and being able to understand people, but to help them get motivated to push after what they really want in life, But why is vision more important in certain times and stable seasons?
It's more important in unstable times because that's kind of what gives you the grit to get out of what you're doing. And it gives you something to fight for. It gives you a reason, gives you a why, it gives you something to strive for, it gives you a goal. And that's important because it also creates a camaraderie amongst your team
Yes.
or the people around you or your relationships, right? So if I'm having a hard time, say financially, right? I need vision for my family and my life so me and my wife can be like, all right, we got to get out of this shit. Like what's our vision? How are we going to get there? What are we going to stop spending on so that we can move out of this mess? If there's something going on at work, like say I'm running bad financials and I'm like, all right, team, let's get together. Here's the vision. What are we going to do? Here's what we're going to attack, and let me show you how much more money you can make personally, or let me show you how many more PTO days you can get if we hit this, and this.
Yeah.
I think that vision in uncertain times is really what keeps the heart beating. It's what keeps us driving and keeps us chasing something. It's kind of like the carrot that the rabbit chases at the greyhound track.
Yes.
It gives you something to chase while it's not physically obtainable right now. It gives you something to be like, all right, but when I get to this is going to happen. When I get to that, it sets benchmarks,
Yeah.
so that you can celebrate small wins along the way.
Yeah.
That's why it's important.
You need to keep that vision when you're going unstable. I just talked about it. Sometimes you lose sight and you start doing other things, bro. You start going after the bottle. You start going getting high, whatever the case may be. But having that vision on certain times and understanding, going back to it, and your why is a big reason for all this. Understanding your why.
Huge.
What keeps me going is my family. Just knowing that my family,
Mhm.
I want to take care of my family. My family's done so much for me, so I keep on going. Even in those hard days when I'm like, damn, I got to get up. I got to go after it. I got to go do this, and that keeps you going. And especially if you stop, your team's gonna stop, because they're following you. You're the leader, and and we go to the next question because it's actually that. What happens to a team or a family when a leader loses their sight?
If you're a good leader, nothing, because your team's already been trained to pull your ass out of it too, right? I think that if you're a true good leader and you lose vision, you've already instilled those habits and those disciplines in your team around you that they can feel comfortable kicking you in the ass too, and coming to you and be like, "Hey, leader, come here. Let me wrap my arm around you. It's my turn.
Yep.
Let's go. This is the vision. Pull your head out of your ass." Just like I've done with you, man.
Yep.
You've come to me a couple times and be like, "Dude, what are you doing?" And we've had those tough conversations, and people don't realize that because a lot of times they don't see it. They just see me as coaching you and mentoring you.
Yep.
But there's been times in my life where you come to me too and you're like, "Dude, like, yeah, your wife has cancer. That sucks. Cool. Let's fucking go.
Yep.
Let's move it on. Keep it trucking."
Yep.
Why are you being down about it, man? She's a fighter. Let's do this shit. We got numbers to hit. We got people around us to impact. Do this shit for your kids. You got to be the rock. So I think when a leader's vision fails, if he's done his true job and he's positioned himself in that spot with good people around him, other people pick up that slack. People talk about relationships being 50-50. I disagree, right? Nobody's ever 50-50. Some days I'm giving 90 and you can only give 10 because
Yep.
that's all you got. And then there's other days it's 60-40. And then there's other days where you got to give 90 because all I got is 10 and
Yep.
I'm burnt. So I think that you create those relationships around you. That vision for your leader shouldn't just be the leader, it should be the team. And you place those people in those important board of directors in your life, we like to call them, whether it's your family, your friends, your coworkers, whatever. And those people call you out, and you get after it, whether your vision's there or not.
And most definitely, I don't want people thinking I was being an ass when but no, I know what drives them, so I know I can push it at, like, hey, let's go after it. And that's something where a lot of people don't know about it or haven't seen it. That I was out there, like, I would go over there, get you, hey, bro, what are you doing? You're fucking up, bro. Let's get this shit together. Let's go pump out these numbers, because our goal was always to be number one, to be on top, to not let nobody catch up to us, and we're gonna leave everybody in the dust. We're gonna have that perfect record and go unbeaten and win the championship. That was our mentality. So anytime I would see it, I would, hey, bro, you painted the vision to me, so I would come over here. Hey, bro, you said you wanted to be number one. You said you wanted to do this, and that. Well, doing that ain't gonna get us to where we want to be. So, but we know, I guess we know how to light a fire under each other because we tell each other some things and then we get pumped up. There's one thing that gets me always would always get me going. You gave me a little picture one day. Everybody else had big old pictures. You gave me the smallest picture. I'm like, damn, bro, like what's going on there? But that set a fuel, under me, and I just kept on going after it. And that year I won the kitchen manager of the year for our market that year. But you lit a fire under me that I kept that vision and I
Yeah,
kept
I'll
on
put
going.
that I'll put that picture right next to your buddy too, because I knew it.
Hey,
I knew it
you
drive
know,
you. Every time I'm like, "Hey man, what's up with that picture?" You'd be like, "Oh man, that's it."
but it
So
keeps you going. It keeps that vision fired up. But it's very helpful to get your whole team on the same vision. Understanding that the goal is for
yeah.
everybody, not just one person. But can you think of a? This is a great one, actually. We could probably talk about this for a good 40, 50 minutes, but we'll throw a couple out there and keep on going to the next question. But can you think of a leader, maybe historical, maybe personal, whose vision inspired people through difficult times?
Man, there's so many leaders that inspire people through difficult times. That's a hard one. I like to read. You like to read. I kind of turned you on to that, So I think Napoleon Hill's always great when it comes to like money stuff, right? I
Yep.
think Ben Carson. Ben Carson's a huge political person, but he's also a neurosurgeon, the first neurosurgeon to successfully separate Siamese twins. He just happens to be a African American man who was born in Detroit. His dad left him. His mom had seventh grade uh, education, no further than seventh grade, but she would work, 2, 3 jobs and make him and his brother read books before they could go out and play with the neighborhood kids. And now he's wildly successful. So seeing someone story like that comes from such adversity into such a powerful position now, and huge Christian faith, so I love that story about Ben Carson. Great dude. Um, there's so many, man. Like,
Yeah.
uh, I'd say a lot of the presidents, FDR, Franklin Roosevelt had a pretty crazy story. I think that was a huge one. But you look at even people like Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant's probably arguably the best basketball player of all time,
Yeah.
and he talks about how he had a summer camp where he played basketball. He didn't make a single basket the whole
Nope.
summer. And his dad was like, "What?" Michael Jordan. I mean, the guy was cut from his high school basketball team.
That chip on the shoulder
So
that kept him going, bro.
dude, I'm telling you, that
You
chip
know.
on the shoulder, and that's a little bit in my book too, and why I tick the way I tick. It all started from a childhood trauma. I've talked about it a couple
Yep.
times, with my mom leaving and stuff, and so there's something to say about trauma that makes us work harder, and it gives us that, oh yeah, let me show you
Yeah.
mentality. And I think a lot of us that are successful, whether it's in our field, our careers, or our relationships, or whatever, something happened that made our mind snap before we got to that.
Yeah.
So there's so many leaders out there, and you could look at the adversity on almost every successful person, and they're gonna have something.
Yeah.
Whether you're coming from first world immigrant to America, so you got to prove the American dream still exists, and,
Yeah.
working your ass off in the fields and running your own business, to everyday people you meet, man. So the adversity is what makes all of us tick.
And definitely, you just talked about the field, so we're gonna throw out Cesar Chavez, who was out there that made a
Yeah,
big movement because my father was is a big farmer who loves to farm. He's in Mexico, he still does that for a living, not a living, he does it for a hobby now. We're able to take care of my dad, but he does it now because he likes to do it. But we talk about him. We talk about Martin Luther King. We talk about Malcolm X, Rosa
huge,
Parks, bro. There's so many people that made a big
huge. All
impact.
of them came through adversity.
Big impact in the world that changed the way we live. And can keep on going deeper on this. There's so many people that were able to leave that big impact in the world. And I like. I'm always gonna say it, Nipsey Hussle. That he's a big impact.
Huge, yeah, absolutely.
In an LA culture, a gang culture, and a minority culture, being able to make that big impact from being on the streets, hustling, selling drugs, dropping your mixtape and doing all this stuff, but showing all of us that if he came from the streets and he was able to do it, what stops us from doing it? And not only that,
Yeah,
but giving back to his community, being able to help people that were in his position and be able to get a lot of kids out of that lifestyle and get into music, basketball, whatever. Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg's another big person,
it's
bro.
a huge,
He
huge.
has that football
I
league
was
that
I was
pumped
gonna
out so
say
many
that.
people, bro. Like he pumped out so many people to the
He's
NFL.
got so many young kids that went into the NFL, but it's beyond that, because the NFL, that's great, man. That's like an end goal for some of these kids that are pumping out, but getting them out of the inner cities to the NFL, that's, I mean, a huge feat. But I think more importantly, it gives these kids something to strive for, not just the NFL, but it gives them the care about other people. It's the camaraderie, it's the team atmosphere. So I think that's more important than, hey, I made these people wildly successful.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that you can take these kids out of inner cities with a shitty home life, and you can pump them into a positive thing like a sport and a team sport, and they get camaraderie with their friends that's not in a gang. It's huge, right? You're changing lives on that
You know.
aspect. And it's not even about the NFL at that point. It's like,
No.
hey, I'm gonna show you how to be part of a team. It's gonna be a football team instead of a gang over here.
Yeah.
So you're giving them the same thing they're looking for that they would get in the inner city streets and gangs, but you're turning it into a positive aspect,
You know.
Huge.
So let's go. How to develop and straighten the vision. Let's talk about how important practicing journaling, prayer, meditation, and some quiet time. It's
That's huge.
yeah,
And I didn't get this in my early career. I really didn't, because someone's like, man, you got a journal. I'm like, dude, I'm not gay. Like, not to be controversial or
no,
nothing.
no, no,
You
most
know,
definitely not.
I'm
Yes.
not trying to be controversial, but I was like, I don't keep a diary. Like, dear diary.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't trying to have a little fairy book with a lock and key and shit like my daughter or something.
Yeah.
Like,
No.
that's what I envisioned though when someone first told me. I'm like 21, 22. I'm like, man, I'm a masculine male. I'm raw. I'm like, I'm not gonna
Yeah.
journal. What the hell is that shit about? And then it really started to write things down and just jot notes. And here we are, 2 books later, man.
Yeah.
And so now I tell you, like,
Yep.
it's unreal because journaling helps you connect with your inner thoughts.
Yeah.
It makes you realize too, like what I did good today and what didn't I do good today, and it creates a record. So I can go back and I can look at my notes and be like, oh shit, I tried that didn't work,
Yep.
so I know I'm not gonna try that again.
Yep.
And then there's other things I'm like, oh, that was cool. I had a good day. Here's what I did. Here's what I ate. Here's what time I went to the gym. Here's what time I went to work. So there's things that historically I could pull from my journals and my notes and things of that nature. And I'm like, okay, I can learn from it, and then I can apply it to my daily. And then, you talked about prayer, and really prayer is your inner uh conversations with your higher God or whatever it is, right? And that's the manifestation, I think, at its finest. So when you're having those conversations with yourself or with God or whatever you believe in, that's important because that gives you clarity for your vision. Because at that point in time, it's something bigger than you. It's something bigger than the earthly things we have around us, and it creates that bigger than now mentality. And it's all for a reason. And I go back to what I talked about earlier. Your vision is, what's my purpose? Why am I here? That's the age old question every human probably asks themselves at one point in their life, like, what's the purpose? Why am I even alive? What am I doing here? And so that prayer and meditation, I think, is important for that, for the casting the vision. And journaling is important for keeping you on track for that vision and maybe even changing your vision. Like, at first I said I wanted to be a people developer and that's what I really wanted to do. And I wanted to kind of do this in my career. And then it kind of grew from that. And it stems from, journaling or reflecting, like, okay, maybe it's bigger than just my work platform. Maybe this is my venue to talk to people and really touch people, but it's bigger than that. My goal and my vision now is much bigger than, hey, I'm a restaurant manager. My goal and my vision now is like, how many lives can I impact?
Yep.
And I wouldn't have got to that conclusion if I was still that young, cocky, arrogant, stupid ass kid. Like, oh man, that's so, like, I'm not doing that. That sounds like that's not masculine, you know? So, uh, but that's kind of where it's at. I think that people people grow, people mature, and I
Most
think that
definitely.
journaling helps you with that. And I think as you continue your life, you really kind of look back on things and reflect on, like, man, that was a crazy time. Hindsight's 2020. That
Yep.
shit was fun, but man, I'm glad I don't live that way no more.
No,
You
most
know?
definitely, and like you said, journaling is very important. Same thing with me. I didn't want to write. I didn't want to do none of that. At school, bro, I sucked at writing. My worst subject was English. I couldn't even write a paragraph because I wrote a run on. I didn't know what put periods and all that. But like we just talked about at the beginning. I wrote a page of the book, and it's something that I write. I stay writing. I have my phone on me all the time. Anytime I have an idea, I write it down on my phone. Boom, boom, boom. That's how I ended up coming up with all these topics and all these episodes that we do have. And I'm constantly writing ideas of things of what can I do better, how can I get better.
Yeah.
This is what I have. But meditation, going to the sauna for me every day and hitting it for an hour, sitting there with a podcast or just some meditation music and just locking in, and just relaxing and letting the world out, no noise coming inside of my head, just me going straight, just relaxing and letting it out, and prayers, being able to just let it all out, sometimes you don't,
Yeah.
we can vent to the person up above, and whoever you believe in, you let it out, and having that quiet time. It's important to meditate and have that quiet time. A lot of people always want to be surrounded, but there's a point in my life where I want to take 15, 20 minutes and be by myself and just sit here. I sit in my garage and I'll listen to some music or I'll just sit here and just record something. But I spend 30 minutes tops by myself and I just enjoy my quality of my time. But let's get to these next question, and we're about to run it quick. This has been a great topic. It's how do you personally stay connected to your vision when life is messy? We talked about it a little bit, so we can go a little quick on this one.
When my life is messy and getting connected back to my vision, I think the things that we have already discussed, the people around you, huge impact, having the right circle around you. But it goes back to what you just said, that thoughtful prayer, meditation, and journaling, that's the way you can pull it back in too. A lot of successful people, they use like vision boards, right? Like they create their vision, they put it on a board. So like They might go cut out a dude with the physique that they want. They might go cut out a Bugatti or a car that they want, and they might cut out a magazine that has a house like a big ass mansion they want. They put all this stuff on a vision board, right? And they're like, boom, post it up, and then they see it every single day. So when you're having that negative day, or when you come home and you want to beat the wife and kick the dog, or whatever it is. No, I'm just kidding, by the way. But when you have that bad day though, and you come home and you're like, hey, today sucked, but you see that vision in your face, it kind of recenters you, and you're like, all right, cool. Like, let's get after it. Tomorrow's a new day. The next hour is a new hour. You don't have to wait for the new year resolution like we were talking about earlier. So it's really about chasing yourself. And, you asked me an important question on that very first podcast we ever did. What's the most important, quote or something? And is
Yeah.
it, are you better today than you were yesterday?
Yes.
So that's, if I ask myself that literally every single day, am I better today than I was yesterday? And if I could look in the mirror and say I wasn't, then the next day I better get up with that fire and go after it. And so that's how I kind of recenter myself. I ask myself that question every single day. I try and create physical things in my house that remind me of my why. When you see on the wall back here,
Yeah.
on the wall
The
back there,
kids.
I got pictures of my kids, man.
Yep.
I got a picture of my kids in my wallet. My wallet has my kids on it, and it's like engraved down there. It's like one of those laser things. So everywhere I go, man, I'm reminded of my vision of why did I do this thing? Why do I work so hard? And so if I see my kids' faces wherever they're at, that's gonna pull me back to my vision when life is messy.
This is the last question. We'll dive deep and quick on it. What practice or habits help leaders sharpen the vision?
What was that?
I said, what practices or habits help sharpen a leader's vision?
I think that attitude of gratitude definitely helps.
Yeah.
And then the journaling is huge. You gotta have that journaling so that you can write down what you've accomplished and what you've done, and then also look in the mirror and make a plan. Get an action plan together, figure out what that bigger vision is, and then break it down into smaller steps. And what do I need to do today to make this week great? What do I need to do this week to make the month great? What do I got to do this month to make the year great? What do I got to do this year to make the 10-year goal or 5-year goal, whatever it is, great?
Yeah.
So it comes down to those daily disciplines we talked about in other episodes. What do you do when you wake up? What kind of routine do you have? What kind of eating habits do you have? What kind of gym habits do you have? That's what it comes down to.
Having those habits is very important to keep you on track, keeping you going. Journal, like you just said, journal, keeping a journal, even that dream board that you
Yeah,
were talking about. Maybe we might make a episode about manifestation and all this other good stuff that
that's a
impacts.
good idea.
We talked about Napoleon Hill and all these people that are big upon that. But with that
Mm,
being said, vision isn't about having all the answers. It's about holding steady to what matters most and leading others through uncertain times with hope and charity. If today's conversation added value to your journal, share this episode with someone who needs this encouragement, someone that needs that bigger picture. It's legacy leaders, but before we get going, let's let them know where they can get that book. Tell people where they can get that book, where they can find it. What? Let's finish it off with that one.
All right, so you can get Beyond the Fall, my journey through second chances. We can possibly hit a link up on Spotify. I'll throw it on all my socials. Elevate your edge. That's the Instagram handle. I'll be on TikTok. You can't really put links on TikTok, but I'll throw a few things on there for you guys. You can get a link and get on, check out that book. I appreciate the support. But Beyond the Fall, my journey through second chances, coming to you from Legacy Leaders. We're your hosts, Ben Davis.
Juan Gutierrez. And with that,
We're out.
we're out.